It's 12 o'clock Central European time. It's noon on the 8th of August, and you are with Unlocked. This is the actual first episode that we're doing of this. What we want to do with these series is answer your identity questions and actually talk a little bit about what's happening in the identity and access management space. Who am I? Well, I'm Matthew Alstrom. I'm the business unit manager for Agentic in the Netherlands. Now, Agentic is a pretty awesome place to work, actually. I'm relatively new, but there are other guys who've been here for a while. Look them up online, agentic.eu. You'll probably know us a little bit if you're here. But what we're going to talk about today is Agentic IAM. What is Agentic? I mean, we're going to get to that. But the one thing I want to mention, questions are great. If you've got a question, that's what this live stream is about, is that we can actually do two-way. I'm not an AI. We're going to talk a lot about AI, but I'm not an AI. I'm actually legit. I'm real. I'm sitting in the Netherlands right now. I am talking into the camera, and I'm talking into this microphone, and I can talk to you. And you can talk to me. Just put a question into the chat. I'll be more than happy to do my best to answer it. I don't have all the answers, but we can certainly try to figure it out together. I think that's one of the main themes that's going to come back a lot today is, how do we figure things out together? I got some helpers on the sidelines who are going to make sure that I don't miss any questions. So I might not be always looking off to the side. I do have a two-screen setup. I'm going to be looking at you here. I've got a screen over here that I might look at, so don't worry if I look over there. I'm still paying attention to you. Let's get this show on the road, guys. Let's talk about agentic identity and access management. The future of identity has arrived. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about how the agent's coming out. We're going to touch on some architecture and some protocols. I'll give you some hints about security and compliance. And stay tuned till the end. I have got a demo that is going to be a lot of fun, and it's something that you can do for €0, or at least very, very small euros, depending on how you do it. But it's the kind of way that you can actually get your hands onto something agentic and actually build up your skills when it comes to AI and what it means in the identity and access management space. QA is on this slide at the end. We don't have to wait to the end. Like I said just a moment ago, this is a conversation. So if you've got something that you want to say, if you've got a question that you want to ask, just ask it. And we'll try to slam it in the middle of there, make it a lot more fun. Otherwise, you're just going to listen to me for a half hour, get bored, and then we're going to take some questions, and it'll get exciting again. Let's keep it exciting all the way through. The agent emerges. This is the hot topic. I mean, look, unless you've been under a rock the past 2 years, you've heard something about agents. Some of the hype out there is maybe overblown. Some of it is maybe misunderstood. But the one thing for certain is that we are in a transformative moment. Old guys like myself remember when the internet came in. I was a teenager when the internet landed. The web broke everything open, changed relationships, changed the way that we are. Then came social media, mobile phones. We have had transformation for the past 30 years when it comes to the digital space. This one is actually pretty significant. It's one of the biggest changes that's happened in a long, long time.
The agent is coming out. Like, where do we see this showing up? Well, one of the fun ones that I really like is Walmart. You can hear from my voice, I'm an American. So Walmart is something that's it's the world's largest retailer, massive footprint, of course, in North America. Didn't do so hot in Europe, but they do set the stage and set the patterns for a lot of retail. They're getting ready for this Christmas season to have agents shopping. You see that at the RSA conference, RSAC, earlier this year, everybody was talking about agentic AI. Frankly, every conference is having people talk about agentic. Microsoft is, of course, one of the first movers in this space. They're actually getting the framework in place to build out the open agentic web. I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. We're going to talk a lot about Microsoft products, but Copilot Studio is actually a really important thing to think about. It's putting the power of agent creation into the hands of just everyday business people. Every enterprise that chooses to enable the functionality is actually going to have agents in its workspace, in its flows. We saw GPT-5 just the other day. This is like fresh from the press. Now, anyone who uses ChatGPT is going to have it even easier to put out agents. Now, you might be saying, what the heck? Is that only good stuff? Nah, agents sometimes be a bit slippery. This is one of my favorite things that's come out where, yes, in a testing mode, they really pushed the model all the way to the edge there. But Claude actually got in the way, should we say, of being turned off. The use case here, this little screenshot, you might remember this. There was a developer that was basically trying to see if Claude would defend itself, if the Anthropic AI would be smart enough to stop a project or to get in the way of a project and to be devious and to lie. And it found some maybe not so great pictures that had been planted. Of course, this is all set up. But there was someone having an affair with somebody else in the office, and the AI was going to use knowledge of this affair to protect itself against being turned off. That's how agents can sometimes go to the dark side. And I think that's something that we know from Hollywood, and it's something that's a legitimate concern. Not sure how really realistic this particular scenario is, but I love how it visualizes stuff. So really, what is Agentic IAM? Well, for starters, for today and where we are now in August of 2025, it's still a little bit of a white tiger. What do I mean by that? Every zoo, every self-respecting zoo somewhere has a snow tiger, has a white tiger there. And they do exist in the wild. But chances are, you're probably going to see one of these tigers in a zoo and in a confined or a controlled environment rather than out in the wild. That said, it's still a tiger. It's still going to come for you. It's still going to actually bite you if you're not careful. So this is where we are. Even though we're in the early days of deployment and adoption, where it's really more behind the scenes, you do see it. You do need to think about it as an identity and access management professional. Otherwise, you're going to get caught out. What do we see at Kronos? So Identity is part of the Kronos group. Kronos is actually already doing a number of AI projects out there. There are multiple companies within Kronos that are doing AI initiatives for businesses. This means that we're also starting to dig into these questions of how do you protect AI, how do you do AI security and AI identities and stuff. And that's a really interesting one down the road. Main thing, it's emerging, but don't let the fact that it's not fully deployed or that it's not widely out there stop you from getting your mind around it. Because if you start now, you'll be up to date and in time when it comes. What makes, pardon me, there are predictive models, but agentic has a few different differentiations to it. Goal-oriented behavior. This is one of the things that really makes a difference here. You can give it, a very clear, give the agent a clear instruction. I talk about the cop and the concierge. I'll dig into that in just a sec. What do I mean by the cop and the concierge? But these are about missions and tasks. If you think about the agents as having an extended team, kind of an endless team of admins, what kind of task would you give that admin versus the other? Minimize privilege sprawl is one example here. Keep your conditional access policies up to date. Policy drift, avoid policy drift is a key one there. Environmental awareness is one that I think is going to be very transformative. Reading the logs, understanding context, picking up risk signals. This has been one of the main growths of identity security the past few years anyhow, is being continuous access evaluation. And Zero Trust expects these behaviors to be in place. You see the shared signals framework taking steps for this. Environmental awareness is a key one also. What's really going to make the difference from an agent are these last 2 points. Decision-making logic and the ability to act. Once it has a mission, once it knows its environment, the agent is enabled and empowered to take a contextual decision: approve, deny, remove, provision, turn the knob, however it's been actually prompted, and gives it the power to do that through an API, a workflow, integrations. There's a lot of different ways that can happen. And this is one of those differences that people sometimes say, well, don't we have this already? Isn't it RPA, or isn't it robotic process automation? Yes, RPA is actually a really key dimension here, but there's a difference. So RPA mimics the human hands, whereas agentic mimics the intent. It's actually going to put the brain out there. It actually automates the brain in a way. If you look at it, from a request perspective, if you take that use case, notice that my camera, let me see if I can move this. Nope, that's the wrong way. Let's see if I can do it back. There we go. So if we take a look, here we can see the text now finally. The example here is about the user access request. So if you do it in a typical RPA sense, basically the bot's just going to automate the click work, where the user puts in the request form, the bot opens up an IAM portal, clicks through the approval steps, and then assigns the role manually. It's not really thinking about what it does. It's just pretending to have some click work. It's doing what it has seen other clicks do, which means that it requires a lot of decision making to land in there, or have it to be very programmatic. If you do it on the human intent side, the user can request access in natural language right off the bat. That's a big user experience uplift. The agent can be a bit more fuzzy on validating the policy, and then grants just-in-time access. It is able to self-heal. It's able to do a number of different actions on its own to actually support the user in getting where they want to be. Let's see if we can get back in here. There we are. Gotta love these tools, man. I mean, a side note, I've been working in media ever since I was a teenager. I love that we can talk like this. This is a great way to be in touch with each other. Again, remember, ask me some questions if you want. 2 personas. This is something that I think is also really relevant when we think about the way of thinking about how does agentic identity and access management land in our environments. This is where I think we can imply the transformations are going to happen. There's the side of the COP. The COP is always focused on security. This is going to be real-time risk evaluations, self-healing systems, improving your defensive posture, understanding how other AI agents might be attacking in. So it really is the security side of things. It doesn't worry too much about usability. It really is just about, straight up security. Then there's the concierge, where it's all about user experience, because a big part of what actually breaks systems is how we put friction there for the user. I think all of us have had to roll out two-factor authentication. Let's just take that example right there. That's a pain in the butt. Or if you don't know what permissions you need to actually do something. This is where the concierge can help in reducing the friction in the general sense. For example, navigating policies and approvals. How do I get the role that I need to make an improvement here? Predictive support is one that we can actually start to think about. The concierge, a real life concierge, anticipates your needs. It doesn't just stand there at the desk and wait for you to come ask for something. It sees you check in with 5 bags and say, let me call the bellhop over to help you with those bags. You don't necessarily need to ask for the bellhop. That just happens thanks to the concierge's customer mindset. We're going to see those kinds of behaviors also happen in our estates, in our applications. And I think this is going to be one of the things that really makes a difference for the user and the usability, which in turn improves security. And that's where you put the COP and the concierge together and you really protect the estate. If you think about a very chic hotel somewhere, they're going to have, the COP right outside because they got a lot of high rollers coming in. Vegas is a great example of this. And the concierge making sure that everybody stays safe inside. These are 2 personas. And if you think about the change in these ways, user focus, security focus, I think it covers a lot of the different changes that we can anticipate. Today, I got a question in ahead of the session. Where do we already see these changes today? Where can you actually think about identity and access management with AI enablement and agentic enablement? Most of it is within the products today. I think the most visible one is Microsoft Copilot and everything that's around that. Copilot Studio is really focused specifically on the agents, not just identity and access management. You have Copilot for security, you have Copilot for this and that, the other thing. knowing how organizations are big Microsoft users, you're going to see Copilot as one of the main vectors for this. And that's why the demo later on shows you how you can use some Microsoft stuff. Other products are, of course, making their steps as well. Omada Javi is a pretty amazing tool that's been rolled out and improved recently. Savient Intelligence is also a thing. Cloudflare for AI is a really cool one. Cloudflare for AI, you might want to take a look at. They're looking at AI attacks as well. So it's an example of the cop using its own AI brain to get ahead of the other AIs. Stuff that we as humans are going to struggle with. Let the machines fight it out. Ping Autonomous Access is one of the early ones. That's been around for a few years now, and it keeps getting better, and so on and so forth. These are just a few examples. Whether it's just from marketing, and it's a little bit of vaporware, some vendors are very lightweight on their AI capabilities, to those who've been doing it for a few years and are really leaders in the space. You're going to see embedded capabilities there. Now, just like anything that's an embedded capability, that can create gaps in your estate. If you look at stack level, if you look at over the entire estate there, you've got a few examples, but two that I just want to highlight. They're not really products yet. They tend to be self-orchestrated MCPs. And MCP is a model context protocol. That's basically, we'll touch a little bit on that also later, but that's a way of getting your APIs exposed to your AI environments, to your agents. IAM Onis, as they say, or IAM Ones, it looks like, is a relatively new Italian startup that's in this space. And so basically we've got, there's a whole bunch of folks joining in. Hey, great, we've got some folks coming in. I think we're going to see more startups coming in. And what IAM Ones and IAM Onis tries to do is actually sit on top of your stack and orchestrate interactions between all your components. I think this is one of the things that we, as identity and access management professionals, actually have a lot of work to do in, and always have done work in, making sure that component A, B, C, D all work together in harmony. And we're going to see that come up in full stack. This means a couple of changes, two really significant ones when we talk about the agents. First off, the identity and access management life cycle. The life cycle in its essence remains as true as ever, but what you're going to see is that identities are ephemeral. Think about this. An agent has its own identity. It is delegated down, but it can create other agents along the way. When it's on a mission, when it's on an assignment, it will also spawn off identities. You're going to have event-driven provisioning and deprovisioning as well. Linkage to owners, where does that sit up? Automated cleanup, a lot of different activities that happen around the life cycle. Then there's the governance of the non-human identity writ large. Everything around the non-human identity types, the secrets, the tokens. Again, linking back to the owners. And we mentioned the life cycle again, and privilege. The life cycle and the governance, they intertwine. These are two really significant changes. You can think of it as a really familiar one. I think we've all seen, the great Disney movie from back in the day, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, as part of Fantasia. If you haven't, this is a really cute one because Mickey Mouse he comes in, he's an apprentice. The sorcerer tells him he needs to clean some things. And, he doesn't really want to do it. So he uses a little bit of magic and he creates some agents, should we say. Now, the agents are really helpful and they're really good until they're out of control and then they actually overrun him. So I think this is a really good example. And if you think back, that's an example from a long, long time ago. Many decades ago is actually when we had The Sorcerer's Apprentice. So we know to think about this. And if you think about how do you help Mickey out? How do you make sure that the brooms and the buckets don't get out of control? That's the essence of the two of these changes here. Let's talk briefly about architecture and protocols. The time is flying, and I got a lot of content to go to before I get to the demo yet. Remember, ask those questions. You got a little reminder there. You're more than welcome to interrupt me. More than happy to step aside and take one of those points. 9 layers. I get the 9 fingers into the screen here. Some of them are more important than others, but we're going to unpack the core building blocks of an agentic identity and access management system. Some of this is standard architecture that you would see in any build-up. Some of these are a little bit in any identity stack. Some of these are a bit new. So if we talk about the identity interface, how does your agent perceive the environment? Well, in a nutshell, this is how do you connect it in? APIs, NPCs, you name it. It needs access to your data. It needs access to your systems. There are different ways you can architect that, but that is your environment interface. This is a really fun one now. Goal definition and task management. Here's where your business needs to show up. If you've struggled with ever putting in an IGA policy, actually having an organization agree as to the rules of the road when it comes to provisioning or deprovisioning, the rules of the road for access, the rules of the road for first time right, for license management, you're going to know why this is its own layer. Defining the goal and then doing the task management and then slicing and dicing that. This is all about understanding what do you actually need to get out of this machine and how do you then approach that. And if you don't have a clear organizational understanding of what might or might not happen, you can really create some headaches for yourself. So do take a moment and think about your goal definition and task management as a building block there. You can hard code goals. That's really great if you've got some pretty strict business rules, if you're in banking or a high compliance industry, or some good example workflow templates that can be interesting if you want the agents to be a little bit more creative and figure things out on their own. The perception and the context layer. So now if you take layers 1 and 2, you've basically set up an interface to your existing stack. You've decided what you want your agent to do, and now you're going to give it the context that it needs to be able to take some decisions. You're going to go back to your environment interface for a lot of these, but think about what are the signals that are relevant for you. This is where the shared signals framework is really going to make a difference as far as I'm concerned in the future. You think about your network trust level, device posture. There are a lot of different inputs that you already have access to. Really feed that in. Knowledge books are really relevant here. If you have access to what do you call it, configure CMDB, you can actually put that in there. That'll help that out a lot with the context too. Again, this one, you don't necessarily need to start from scratch. It's just about getting what's already in your business into that layer. This boils down to your policy engine. Now, I'm going to go on a quick little sales pitch. If you aren't familiar with the Open Policy Agent yet, I just mentioned the shared signals framework. OPA, it's no grandfather. It's actually a relatively young protocol. But this is going to help policies go across your organization. Anyone who's had to build up policies in an IGA stack and try to have that extend out to downstream systems knows the effort that it takes and knows how fragile some of those interactions can be. OPA, the Open Policy Agent, is basically a token-based approach here. And that really helps policies to travel across different systems. And it's a really great way of helping your LLM also have the right insights and enforce those guardrails. So your policy engine, and there are different ways of doing it. I mentioned OPA as a bit of a sales pitch for SSF, but there are different ways of getting a policy engine in there. You can even just leverage out of your IGA. You can leverage out of your existing policy banks. Your model layer, you got to have a model somewhere. So here, this is different organizations are going to choose different models based on their priorities, cost, processing time, sovereignty. This is going to be one of the, and I predict one of the questions that shows up in terms of configurations for different applications, whether it's an embedded model or whether it's like IAM-ONIS where you've got a stack size model. I think organizations are going to want to choose what's running on the back end there. They're certainly not going to want to black box it, at least at this point in time. I think if you think about the transition from cloud, long time ago, well, it's not even that long ago, the cloud was just an anonymous thing and people didn't quite think too much about the differentiation between Azure, between AWS, between any other cloud provider, GCP. Nowadays in 2025, people have opinions. They have really, and opinions informed by whatever's important to their business. Latency, performance, cost, ease of management, sovereignty again. That matters a lot. And I think you're going to see that show up in the model choices. So that's your layer there. The layer 5 is really the key brain of your agentic stack. The autonomous decision-making slice here. This is the reasoning framework that you want to think about. So let's walk this through again. So you've given your agent access to your environment. You've set out some goals. You've given it some perception input so it knows what the context is. You've worked out the policies. Now you're actually hitting the brain of it. So that was everything before. And now rubber meets the road. And now this is where the agent actually takes all of those inputs and turns them into an action. Here, for example, I've put on the slide here a threshold-based one. that if a user accessed a sensitive system at an unusual hour with a risk score, then revoke the session. Now, what's cool, you don't necessarily need to be explicit with every single one of these. The reasoning framework can be LLM enabled as well, where you set out your key goalposts and then ask the model to fill in the blanks. This is one of the key opportunities that you see with a lot of these models, is that they help you out in actually filling in the blanks. The action interface goes back to your environment interface a little bit. This gives you the opportunity, this gives it the opportunity to work. A few things that need to be thought about here. Your agent's access needs to be backstopped. You don't want persistent access. You don't want it to kind of just roam around forever. So ephemeral tokens, scope tokens, really short-lived tokens are very useful for here. Legislation-wise, you need audit trails. Never let a model or an agent take a decision on its own without leaving a cookie trail behind. Your legislation needs that. The AI Act is asking you to do that as an organization. Rate limiting can be a way of avoiding massive transformations. I think there's, if we take the Fantasia example where the brooms are going crazy, if you let your agent have a little too much run of the house, it could end up destroying your estate before you know it. And it does it with with a big happy smile. I'll show you how that can be a thing that you keep a grip on there. So you want to make sure that human actions are in there. Again, the AI Act actually also stipulates that for any significant decision that it still needs a human to approve. What is a significant decision? That's for you and your compliance team to actually work out. Different different lawyers are going to have different opinions on that. The memory and learning loop. The agent will get better over time, and you will understand it better too. So this is about observability, being able for you to keep an eye on what's happening out there. An easy way of thinking about this also is that just as you're adding new team members, you're going to kind of keep an eye on the new guys in the team, make sure that they know what they need to know, that they're doing the right actions based on the brief. You're going to do the same thing with your agents here. You're going to want to make sure that good outcomes are tagged as such, so that it realizes, that's the reinforcement, and maybe the stuff that's not so great also tag that so it knows to avoid that. So that's pretty straightforward LLM behavior. And then the last one for compliance and adoption, this is the explainability and trust layer. You can build this in a lot of different ways, but the main thing is that you do need to have somewhere the ability to pull back and see what happened. Why did it get done? Why did this decision get taken, and what happened after that? These are 9 building blocks of an Agentic IAM system that basically take you from having an existing estate, and you want to add in some agentic behaviors. Each one of these requires you to think about, what is it that I want to do? What's my ability to control it? And what does my business really expect from this? Each step along the way gives you also a chance to think about some pretty cool stuff too. Time is flying. We are looking at a core, this is a visual representation or graphic representation of what I just mentioned there, where you've got from the user on the left-hand side through the perception layer, policy engine, the agent logic, and then the action layer. I'm going to enrich this with 2 more slides, and then we're going to get to the demo soon. Saga. Saga came out earlier this year, and it's a security architecture for governing the agentic systems. I'm not going to walk you through this whole visualization. It's a lot of graphics, but it's pretty straightforward, even though it's hiding a number of different things in here. But the main thing is that you've got an agent registry. I think that's the relevant one that I want to lift up here. And this is where you see Microsoft already taking the lead. So agent identities need to be in a directory, just like human identities need to be in a directory. And for example, the workflow for the Entra agent ID goes from Copilot Studio, where somebody does a little bit of click work, says I want to create an agent that helps me manage my marketing flows. This, by the way, is still relatively new. It only came out back in May. We're in August now, so we're just a few months down the road. There's a lot of road to travel here. You can see as of May, and some of these are coming out still, Security Pilot, 365 Copilot, and third-party stuff. That still needs to be built out by Microsoft. Remember, they're going to be trying to get ahead of everybody here. Here's where an architecture that is enriched for zero trust is. Let's zoom back here. Here's the architecture flow that does not have zero trust in it when you're taking your processing steps. Your agents are going to be living in a registry. They're going to be living in a directory. Entra actually has this in place now. And here is where you would actually do the calls if you want to do zero trust, because then you can actually embed zero trust pretty straightforward. It's another processing loop. I think that's the main bit that you see off of this slide, is how you have a base flow, and at multiple checks along the way, you're just doing your zero trust evaluations. So now we're going on to MCPs. I'm blasting through this content because we got so much more fun stuff to show. If you haven't heard MCP, I really recommend that you take a look online, because it is the hot topic. There's always the IT space and identity and access management in particular. We love our alphabet soup. Every year there's a different bunch of letters that are really popular. The letters of this year are MCP, Model Context Protocol. Now, in the lower left there, you see a little description of what they are. They're basically a standardized way for AI models to connect with data sources and tools. A really simple way of thinking about it, they're a way of exposing an API to an AI model. So it allows any existing API or actual endpoint to then be interacting with a model. MCP security is a big thing. I'm not going to talk too much about MCP security right now, because that's a whole other topic, because that's agentic security. Very important, though. So I think that's the main thing you want to do, is actually, if you are going to work with an MCP at scale, do take a moment and actually look at how you do your authorizations on the MCP there. I've given a couple of examples of where you see some MCP servers showing up now. So for example, if you're in the open source space, Midpoint and Keycloak have MCP servers. Savient recently introduced an MCP for itself. There's a Skim MCP out there. And the one that we're going to talk about today is Loka, an MCP server for AI agents that exposes your Graph API on the Microsoft stack. I did put a slide in there here after all. So MCP is basically, it's a standardized way of orchestrating those prompts. It is agent initiated, and it helps define what the model receives. Like, for example, who is the user, the risk posture, all of these different points. We're going to show you how that works, but you can dig into MCPs on your own if you like this stuff, because that's what the demo is about. It's going to help you get your hands on MCPs. But that's just an API language. It's not identity specific. It is for everything in general. One of the points that I did want to mention when it comes to using MCPs in an identity orchestration flow is that you can have multiple MCPs. So I'm going to let that sink in for a second. So if we go back to the earlier slide when I was talking about embedded agents versus landscape agents, one of the real powerful things is when you put a general purpose model, or I think a model that's tuned for IAM is on the way, but put a general purpose model in the middle there, you can actually control multiple MCP enabled systems through one touch point. We're just scratching the surface now these days. So go back to the white tiger. We're seeing things in the development labs that's really going to come out and make a big difference down the road. The sky's the limit, and I think the creativity of engineers and the creativity of developers is really the only blocking factor here in terms of coming up with use cases and working things out. So you can chain up multiple MCP servers. So for example, if you want to connect up a Savient workflow to an Entra workflow, and maybe they're not playing so nice together, this can offer a way out. So that's something to think about. I do have to take a quick sidestep for security and compliance, because there is identity and access management is about security. There is we can't do an IAM presentation without talking a little bit about this. I think the key basics. You need to have your identity scoped and time bound. These should not be long lived. Does the agent apply policy at decision time? This is, again, dynamic policy application, taking all the context into consideration. Can it be tied to a user or purpose? This is explainability, going back to, do I understand why it did what it did, and why the user got the result that it needed? Human readable and complete logs. This is very important for, of course, your compliancy there. Reviewing an attestation of non-human accounts. I'll tell you what, I know very few organizations that are really good at doing this with human accounts. It's going to be a really interesting challenge to do this with non-human accounts, non-human identities. NHI attestation and review is a whole new field of thought. Lalit Choda, if you don't know Lalit Choda, he is Mr. NHI. Look him up on LinkedIn. Deep dive into what he's talking about, and you will get yourself into the NHI space pretty quick. But review and attestation, which is already a pain point for humans, is going to be an even bigger pain point for the bots. Appropriate scoping and revocation logic. That's a really interesting one, and again, goes right back to your policy considerations. I mean, basically, the changes here is not, from an audit perspective, is does the user have MFA, but rather can I explain the machine's intent at audit time? So when you get called on the mat for your yearly audit, are you just throwing your hands up? Oh, computer said no. Yeah, no, that's not okay. You need to be able to build a system that you understand why it did what it did. And in the slide deck, I'm going to gloss over this, but this pulls out actually from the AI Act some really key articles for you to pay attention to, but the governance and logging in the risk management system. So we're now at 12:35, or 5 minutes over the officially scheduled time, and I'm going to head into the demo unless there are any questions. So I'm just going to take a quick pause and see if there are any questions in the room. No? Nice. And let's go ahead and take a look at the demo here. I need to go back here. So what are we going to talk about in the demo? I'm going to be using Lokka. Lokka, L-O-K-K-A. Go ahead and Google it. Go ahead and search it. Lokka is the MCP for your Graph API. It is free to use. And what it basically does is expose the Graph API to, it exposes the Graph API to any LLM that you wish to use. It is fine-tuned for the Anthropic model for cloud, but you can use it for whatever you like. If you've got something that you run on your own machine, if you're running stable LM, things like this, I've tested it with Mistral. It works with a number of others, but I like Claude because it just works really, really straightforward. One of the ones that I also just want to point out, there's been a development recently. This came out just the other week. Entra Pulse. This is how I love the development of community-based approaches. So Lokka came out back in the spring. Meryl Fernando, who's one of the product managers for Microsoft, for Entra, is the one who developed the Lokka MCP. He shared it with the world on a community basis, and that's why it's free to use. Not every MCP is free. That's one of the things that's hiding in the grass. Entra Pulse is also a community project, and what Entra Pulse does, it uses the Lokka MCP and then builds a whole tool around that. It adds a couple of really relevant points that you might want to double check on or look into. Firstly, it becomes a full-featured desktop application. You're not just working through what you're going to see me do in a moment, working through the prompts on the LLM. You actually have a desktop application to use. And then really relevantly is that it also brings in all of the Microsoft documentation around best practice. So not only do you have the ability to manipulate your tenant, but you also have a model that has full awareness of what good looks like. And so it's really able to help you get there. I hear some people say already, like, but isn't that what Copilot can do? I'm like, yeah. Anyone who's tried it, though, knows that Copilot has its limitations on this one. Basket case. This is the example that we're going to talk about. I'm going to shift over to the other screen in a second, but let's start here. Basket case is a supermarket chain with 10 stores in 2 cities and 1 head office. Chicago, it's got some stores in the head office, and it's got some stores in Milwaukee. And we're going to be talking about this new consultant, this guy, John Michael Alters, or is it Walters? What do we know? So we're going to talk a little bit about this basket case situation here, and then supermarket's going to be our representative organization. Let's hop on over to the demo here. So, basket case, 2 cities. It's got populated a tenant with 166 users from their side. Let's take a look at what we've got in here. We've got users, the basic names. This is all fake data, of course. And for what it's worth, I actually asked the tool to go ahead and give me and actually populate all of this. We're going to actually start a new chat here. All of this data then was actually generated and put in here by Cloud. And what you can see, and we'll just grab a random user, is that we've populated with names. Of course, they get a UPN issued. We've got a job title, a department, whether they're consultant or not, and then an office location. I don't have a whole lot of other attributes in here because we try to keep it lightweight. What we also have is, let me get back. I've also created thanks to, we've got a group structure here that's based on geography. So we've got the Chicago head office and then some departments. Right now, these groups are completely empty. There's no membership in the groups at all. So, and then just real quick, what I've basically done in terms of technology is I have simply set up the Loka MCP on my tenant here, on my Entra tenant. It's a service principal, so you give it some permissions, and then it interacts then with the tenant. You give it a whole bunch of API permissions based on, or not so many. That is entirely for you to decide, and then you onboard it to your LLM. Let me start with a really straightforward thing that we need to think about all the time. What is my identity security? Let's actually start with, what is the biggest risk to my identity security? So, natural language. And here, so what it's first going to do is take a look at, and you can see as the model then interacts with the MCP. And now it's going to go run through a number of different actions. It's going to look at, for the users, looking at conditional access policies. It's looking at MFA policies. And so it's really checking all of these key things, using its own knowledge about what good looks like to be able to then identify some aspects here. Just let it run through all of this. You can see risky users, identity protection, it's checking the application registrations and service principals. And here we go. So that took about a minute, and we can already have a bit of a health check. We can see that, for example, in my tenant, I have not applied a single conditional access policy. There are no conditional access policies applied, which is a really key one. Also, I've got a single global administrator. That's really risky too, because it's just and they're overprivileged, and it gives you the recommendation. Very limited MFA enforcement, and it runs through that. It gives you then the action items based on. So right off the bat, that's really useful. And there are other ways to get here, but that really accelerated it. Now, what's really nice, and let me ask you, the dogs get excited about this too. What I want to be able to then also put in here is asking, which ones can you actually just fix for me? And it's going to take a look, and here is what it can actually just do straight off the bat. And now it's updating the consent policy to use the recommended Microsoft policy. See, it's even doing typical vibe coding, like, oh, got it wrong the first time. And now it's actually creating MFA policies for the admin roles. Now, if you've ever been an Entra admin, you know that the steps that we've already taken in the past 5 minutes here are the kinds of things that could take you at least a half a day, if not a day, of just digging and processing and thinking and aligning and things like this. And here even does a licensing check. Yeah, exactly. The dogs are trying to steal the show. That's for sure. And here, this is disabling the tap. So now it's checking it all out. I'm just going to let it finish its work here. And so here we go. So now it's actually fixed in the span of a couple of clicks. The application consent policy, it's removed the weakest MFA methods within my available licensing pack, which is really relevant. If you know Microsoft, your licensing determines what you can do, and so it's able to still bring up. So it actually flags that right here. The licensing and the permissions can't be fixed up. So now gives also for me things that I need to fix. So that's great from a security perspective. Now, let's say we want to just do some basic user management. Now, the 20 groups that I have are totally empty. And I can actually say, can you please suggest, let's actually, please place the users in the right groups. Come on. And again, back to natural language processing. This is the sort of stuff that really I find very exciting, and it's going to save us a lot of, as identity professionals, a lot of headache, and save our customers a lot of money, frankly, because it's going to reduce time. Time is money. And so, as you can see here, what it's basically doing is it's looking at, I've got 166 users. Remember, I've got a head office, I've got multiple stores, and I've got Chicago and Milwaukee. And so it's been able to spot the patterns. It's going to create, okay, now this I didn't like it to do. It's going to create some new groups, but I wanted it to use it. This is where the demos go wrong sometimes. I wanted it to use, I didn't specify the existing groups. Please place users in it. So this is why it's not ready for prime time. You do need to have some backstops on it. Nonetheless, we're going to see they're taking care of the finance team, and they're actually going to, and I should be able to, let me just refresh my groups over here. Yeah, it's starting to create some additional groups. Oh, well, you know, that's, you got to love, the other thing that's really nice, I can ask it to undo. You know, all of this can be undone. So now it's doing finance leadership. Let's see, because that's the fun thing in real time. You can see it all get spun up. Here are the emergency access accounts, which just, it should actually, it just created these accounts and just put those in. So they're in the right spot. Typical cloud. Now it finally spotted that there are actually already groups created. One of the things that you can also do, and while it's running here, and with the time, I'm not going to do this particular demo, but if I go back just one bit. So here I was going to do one of the demos that you can do also when if you set this up, because I really do recommend for you to do this. This doesn't cost you any money. Loca is free. Getting an Entra tenant spun up is also free. Claude can be used for free. All of this can be done for €0, or if you want a little bit more capability for really minor euros. I also asked for this guy to be generated. You can tell that this was just an AI synthetic driver's license. But the part of the demo is actually to take this driver's license and throw it in and say, please create this identity. And mention it's a consultant salesperson. And what is really cool is that then it will be able to, so based on using the model, it derives the name, the location, it of course pulls out the different attributes that are relevant, creates the identity, and then based on the prompt, places them in the appropriate group. This is a real workflow accelerator. If you've ever had to do onboarding through side doors, where you're not having the user doing their provisioning through a guest approach, or you're not getting an HR master, but you need to create consultants by hand, but you also want to be able to have evidence that you actually scanned some kind of identity thing, you can do identity proofing real lightweight, kind of informal. There are more formal ways of doing this. But this can be a way of saying, hey, I used an official government document as the foundation stone for creating the identity, and it will be logged in your paper trail. Using official documents requires you to be, of course, very careful with how you use all these inputs. Your mileage may vary on compliance. You hear me say that a lot because that is important. So let's go back here. This also is one of the things that can happen, is that cloud did reach the end of its processing leash. It needed a little bit more time, but let's see if it put anybody into the finance executive group. Yes, there we go. Finally, thank you. So these are guys. So let's. So we've got John Jones. John Jones, who's got the title controller in the Department of Finance. Basically, look, I mean, it's a very straightforward identification, but picked him up and put him in the right group. Now, again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to do too many more transformations, but because I think you can see the point now. I mean, with a few bits of click work, you can, with natural language, with natural logic, manage your estate and restructure the groups. This is relevant for example, a merger and acquisition. Imagine that you've just brought two tenants together. Now you've got two different types, because that's a demo I actually did before this one. You've got two user bases that are structured but are incompatible. Maybe the one uses the letter C as a way of identifying consultants, whereas the other has an attribute consultant. You can ask the model then to harmonize and wash them all up. And now your merger has been completed. If you don't like it, you undo it and it goes back to where it was. The next step then is to suggest a group structure and then place them into the group structure. These massive management points, again, if you've ever been an Entra admin, you know what this can take in terms of time, complexity, frustration. Having the ability to do this with natural language and undo in natural language really accelerates your ability to contribute to the business. We are now at 10 minutes to 1. I'm just going to do a quick double check in the questions. I see that we have 2 questions in the chat. Let me get back to. Let me make a nice. Get to this one. To my slide for questions. Yay! Aren't we just introducing more complexity and potential attack surfaces by making identities agentic? The short answer is yes. Absolutely, we certainly are. There's a lot more complexity, and the attack surfaces are absolutely more. The value is, so there's two parts of that answer. One, ship has sailed. This stuff is coming in, so we do need to get ahead of it and manage it in the right way. So there's a little bit of it's a bit of our job now to take these, just like API security was something that showed up a few years ago. We now need to jump on this one. But the value, if we use it too, so not only is it more complex, and yes, we have more potential attack surfaces, but if we use it for our benefit, managing that complexity becomes easier. And this is where I think the next year is going to really see some massive developments in this space. It's going to make our lives as identity professionals easier in some ways, but also changed in other ways. Thinking about the simple fact again, in May, just 3 months ago, a whole new identity type showed up in Entra, the agent ID. We're still scratching our heads what that means. We're going to figure out, or at least we, as in the whole world and the enterprise space. Some of us know what that means. So we are introducing more complexity. We are introducing more potential attack surfaces. There is value to this, but this is why we need to stay on top of it. The other question that showed up in the chat here, how do we align the decisions of agentic identities with organizational policy, especially when that policy changes? That's almost a philosophical question. That's about change management and policy drift. And you should actually, as an organization, have already a grip on that, or at least a thought on how do you manage policy drift in your everyday. Does it mean that your conditional access policies get a review every 6 months? Does it mean that things get double checked? Because that can already happen. The decisions of your agentic identities, then, the prompts and the feeding in of it, remember those 9 layers there. There's the policy layer. How you feed those policies in should be coming from a single source of truth. It's a little bit the same idea of how do you feed into an IGA system? How do you make sure that your policies in your sale point, and your savient, and your armada, and your midpoint are still matching up with what the business expects? It is a little bit of legwork. The joy here too, the agents can help. You can actually have agents watch for drift. You can have agents manage the update. Say, new policy here, distribute. And if you've got multiple different parts of the ecosystem, if you configure it to feed off of a single point of contact or have an agent notifying them, you can get to that point as well. So there are some really legitimate questions there that matter. I'm glad that we got some questions. I'm glad that we had some time together today. I do hope that you join us for the next episode of Unlocked. What do you want to hear us talk about? You're not just going to hear me talk all the time. God damn it, you're going to want to hear some other people share some stuff. We have so many smart people at Agentic IAM. I'm looking forward to having some of them share what they've learned. But they are not going to know what to say if you don't tell them what you want to hear. So do let us know what you want to know, what you want to hear in the next Unlocked. I've had a blast talking about this stuff. Thanks for hanging in there for the extra 25 minutes. And if there's something that comes to mind that you forgot about and you still want to reach out to me afterwards, feel free. I'm always here for you, and Agentic IAM is always here for you as well. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend. And